So even before Roe v. Wade was overturned, we had been saying, and everyone in the pro-life movement had been saying, we're going to have ourselves a battle at the state level now. In many ways, the battle for to save children in the womb was just beginning. And boy, is that ever true. Just 2 weeks after that momentous court decision, it is an all-out battle in the states. President Biden today, this is Friday, is expected to sign an executive order where he promises to hire a team of attorneys to battle every single state that has abortion restrictions in the nation. And on the other side, on our side, we have the Thomas More Society, the great attorneys who fight all the good fights on behalf of the pro-life movement and have been doing so for many, many years. They've drafted some model legislation to help those states who have abortion restrictions and to try to prevent those residents from going outside of the state to have abortions. And to discuss that with us right now, Peter Breen joins us from Chicago of the Thomas More Society. Peter was quoted in a Washington Post article just a few days ago that just kind of laid this out matter-of-factly. And boy, what a firestorm ensued after that. Hello, Peter Breen.
Hey, Jim. Boy, it's been an interesting time here. I mean, we're 2 weeks after Dobbs, and folks are still not understanding the full extent of what it means to properly wipe away Roe and what we need to be doing at the state level on the pro-life side in both a creative and a very forward-looking way to create an environment where every unborn resident of a pro-life state is protected, no matter where that person may be. You know, you can't just take that little unborn resident of Texas across the line or over into Illinois and get them aborted. You know, can't do the same, you know, and I've got to tell you that sentiment, just that sentiment that we need to look at the unborn child's interests, not just the pregnant woman's interest. That sentiment has caused a massive firestorm. I know I've been getting attacked on Twitter and everything else. But you know what? This is what we're here for, to save as many babies as possible.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that, because the Washington Post story was really a pretty decent news article where it quoted you and it talked about what Thomas More was doing. But the reaction to this, Peter, is an indication of just how desperate and hysterical that the pro-abortionists really are.
And I'll tell you something. We had only soft launched our initiative. So one of the things about Thomas More Society, and folks know us because we've probably represented your pro-life organization or we've represented you and helped you out. And so while we will occasionally help on legislative issues, that's not really been our bread and butter. And long term, we don't expect it to be our bread and butter. We're in court lawyers. But we looked at our team and we saw, I was the Republican floor leader for the Illinois House. We have a sitting member of the Missouri House of Representatives on staff, folks who've worked for legislative shops in other states. And so, and we saw there's a little bit of a vacuum. As much as we expected Roe to be overturned, it's been 50 years. And so everyone was focusing on different parts of this. And we saw, well, no one's really focusing on the part we believed was important. And where we could add some value. So we've now soft launched an initiative, and it just so happened we were talking to the Washington Post reporter about some other things, mentioned it. She puts it in the article, and 10 more media inquiries. People are going nuts. They desperately want to hear about it. And so that's really, that's where we are right now. Having not actually properly, formally launched our initiative, we're now running full speed, because of just the national interest.
Great. And isn't it interesting, Peter, that for 50 years we had to hear the abortionists talking about how this is my right, this is my constitutional right. All of a sudden it's not their right. So now they are devising ways to try to get around it. Biden is promising that he is going to do everything in his power to make sure that chemical abortions are legal in every single state.
And look, we were expecting something that was overreaching, not supported by the law. what Biden won't talk about, and what you will not hear these folks on the other side talk about, is that there are existing federal statutes, been on the books since 1873 or before. They specifically prohibit the mailing of abortion pills or the carrying of abortion pills on any common carrier. That's illegal right now under federal law. So what's the basis that Biden could possibly have to tell states, no, I'm not only going to ship these abortion pills into your state, I'm going to force you to allow them and let you have no regulation over abortion. And half the abortions that are happening are probably chemical nowadays, depending on the statistics you see in the state.
Oh, it's a little more than half. Last year, it was 52%, Peter.
I'll tell you, Jim, one of the problems here, it is tougher and tougher to get good numbers on any of this.
Yeah.
The other side has pushed pro-abortion states to stop reporting. I don't know if you've seen that. That's been an issue. And so, we don't necessarily know. We've got rough estimates as best we can tell. Yeah. I would say this, though. We expect Biden to overreach. What I hope that we on our side fight them vigorously at every single turn. I know this issue of out-of-state abortions of our unborn residents is one that people are going, oh, well, what's that about? Can you really regulate that? And I would respectfully contend that there are law review articles over the years that say, yes, boy, there's something there, and even pro-abortion law professors would even grudgingly concede, yes, of course, a state has an interest. If you treat the child as a child, you can't take you can't take a child across state lines for the purpose of sex trafficking or other abuse or death, as in this case. And so, no one would bat an eyelash if a state said, "Hey, you can't take this child across state lines for the purposes of sex trafficking." You wouldn't challenge that. But here, because of the preconceived notions and the personal policy beliefs on abortion, you're seeing people go, oh, no. You've got a right to travel. You have a right to free movement. And I just, this point is so clear to me, and I'm trying to help make it clear to as many people as possible. If you ask the question of any lawyer in the country, can a state stop a person, an adult, from going out of state for a medical procedure? Every lawyer in the country would say, well, no, of course not. But if you ask them the question, can a state stop one of its children from being taken out of state for the purpose of sex trafficking, abuse, or death? Well, then you're going to get a very different answer, which is of course not. Of course, a state can get in that. You can't stop a state from protecting their children. And so that's where we are today. And one of the big things that caused so much consternation, because the other side has been setting up logistics centers in Southern Illinois, trying to bring people from as far away as Texas and all across the middle of the country to come in and pay their expenses, put them up, all expenses paid, free abortion, et cetera. So we're to some extent raining on their parade, but really, in my mind, I'm seeing we're enforcing the laws of the pro-life states, the protective laws and the protective interests of those states.
You're right. And let's be clear, Peter, Illinois is one of, I think, 6 states, including the District of Columbia. So we have 7 places where you can have an abortion right up until the time of birth. The only other 2 countries in the world that permit that are China and North Korea. And now I guess your governor Pritzker is out inviting, like I've heard they're planning to build abortion facilities on the borders, as you said, to lure people in. But Peter, what would this legislation do? I mean, this is similar, isn't it, to the law that was passed in Texas that gives a citizen an opportunity to sue that provider, correct? Or help us understand that. Yeah.
Well, and so this gets to our big picture framework. Where we're trying to add some value as Thomas More Society is to bring forward insights of what's different today than pre-Roe. So you're talking 50 years ago. Any state legislator that was active in their state's legislature pre-Roe, most of them are dead or they're very long retired. So even understanding the terms of the debate, we don't have anyone to really talk to and say, well, what were you guys thinking about back then in the late 60s, early 70s? But what we can do is look at the development of the law over the last 50 years and the development of technology and science. Science and technology, which has helped us on the pro-life side, 4D ultrasound. People are putting pictures up of their, 12-week-old unborn babies, and you can't look at the refrigerator and people don't ask, how's your fetus developing? No, it's how's your baby? Isn't that a beautiful baby? And so that's helped us. From the legal side, we've identified three key things that we would say are critical from before 1973 to today, last 50 years. Number one, public officials are very much willing today to not enforce laws, even though they're valid, because they don't like the law.
Yep.
Now, and this happens on both sides. I like to be, want to be as fair as possible. If there are some Republicans that say, well, I'm not going to enforce that law, even though it's valid and constitutional. Yep. And then on the Democratic side, you're seeing it right now in the abortion context, where folks are saying, nope, I'm not enforcing it. And you're sitting there going, it's on the books, it's legal. Supreme Court just told you that it's not against the Constitution and it's fully within your state's right to do. They're saying, nope, we're not going to do it. So that's number one. Number two, abortion pills, we just discussed, much more prevalent than they had been 50 years ago. And, we didn't have the kind of abortion pills we've got today 50 years ago. And certainly, not the common status of at-home, do-it-yourself abortions. I mean, horrible development today, and one that we would say you've got to look at in your legislative schemes. Number three, and very important, this issue of pro-abortion states and their public officials aggressively trying to draw into their states the unborn residents and their pregnant mothers from the pro-life states to abort those unborn children. Pre-Roe, nearly every state in the country significantly restricted abortion. And the few that didn't, you didn't see the kinds of travel to those states that you're seeing today. So, but that is the backdrop. Going back, number one, public officials that won't enforce the law. How do you get around that? First off, you give other public officials the ability. So if there's one DA that's bad, say in Austin, Texas, you give other DAs the ability to enforce the laws in Austin. Sometimes you can do that under state law. Sometimes you can't. Maybe you give the attorney general also concurrent authority. But one thing that gets this civil enforcement leaves the public officials out of it. So you don't even have to worry about, the DA won't do it, so we're going to try to get the attorney general to do it. And the attorney general's friendly, but he's busy and we're not sure. Look, if you use civil enforcement, then private parties can bear the cost of the litigation. They can go in and do it. And so then, and you can get much more expeditious resolution of these situations. Also, if you're on a criminal side, you're at a beyond a reasonable doubt standard of proof. On the civil side, it's preponderance. So it's just 50% plus one. And you get this, you get very civil discovery is very deep and detailed. You don't get to issue search warrants, but you get a lot of deep discovery on the civil side. And it's to our detriment when we're trying to represent someone like David Blyden or good pro-life heroes. They want to dig through every little thing you've got. But imagine when the shoe's on the other foot. We're sitting here trying to figure out, did this abortion fund help this person, give them money to go abort their unborn baby over in Illinois? Well, we're going to be able to get discovery on that.
And it's not just fun. I mean, we're talking about corporations saying they're gonna pay for their employees to go have babies, or I'm sorry, to go have abortions.
Right. Well, and you sit there. It's not a big step to think. When does the abortion subsidy from one of these woke corporations then become a pressure point for the corporations? Let's say your immediate boss says, well, you're pregnant, or you are going to be getting an abortion, right? We need you back. We can't have you going on a 6-month maternity leave. We can't, right. And then, of course, the bean counters in the back office are going, well, an extra dependent is going to increase our insurance costs and all this. I mean, look, it's not hard to conceive of a place where, yes, that abortion subsidy becomes a coercive effect on a woman in the workforce. So much less being an assistance, it's obviously an assistance in killing that unborn child illegally. Our main focus, and we've tried to put this out to the media, because they want to get you and go, oh, well, you want to enforce against women or what have you. No, right. The focus is the abortionists, the abortion funds, the Planned Parenthoods of the world. And if the woke corporations want to join that group, yes, you go after the woke corporations. I will tell you, though, if laws like what we're proposing are passed, the corporations will just stop. This idea, oh, you're going to have to sue so-and-so and sue so-and-so. No, they'll just stop.
Yeah.
Look at the Texas Heartbeat Act. Now, I know within the pro-life movement, there was some healthy maybe debate over whether that was the right way to go. And how does it work? But at the end of the day, nearly all the abortions in Texas were shut down. So the Texas Heartbeat Act and that unique model of private, it's a private attorney general statute, that model of enforcement has to some extent been proven. And so when we're talking civil enforcement, we recommend states add a civil enforcement protection to their abortion laws, whatever they are.
Yep. Now,
and you can do it that way. There's another way, though, that is that folks would recognize, and I think would be even more understandable to people. You expand wrongful death to include abortion. I mean, think about it. We already have a wrongful death set of laws. It's very well known. In the law, we're always looking at analogs. Well, have we done something like that before? Well, then you could have, mother, father. Look, how many times have we heard in the pro-life movement, pregnant woman has abortion, regrets it soon thereafter? Well, under a statute like what we'd be proposing, she can go to court and get damages, emotional damages, et cetera, for having the illegal abortion performed on her.
And you're exactly right, Peter. The woke corporations aren't going to want to have anything to do with any of that. You can count on that. Gosh, well, Peter, thanks so much for boiling this down for us. So now it's time for these state legislatures to get fired up and to start passing some legislation, right?
Well, and I'll tell you, so having been a legislator, it is, for most folks, it is a part-time job.
Yep.
You're in the middle of a general election right now in a remap year. So that means you've probably got new voters that you've got to go reach out to, might have a hot race. So right now is not the time when they're actually in the legislature doing their business.
That's right.
They're usually at home in their districts, maybe, catching up with their family, getting reacquainted, doing their day jobs. Most legislators are part-time. They're meant to come from the community and just be business people or, truck drivers, or they do something else as their full-time job. Legislature's part-time. So what we're planning on right now and what we're moving toward is January.
Yep.
So when the new legislatures are seated in 2023, January 2023, that is when you're going to see a lot of this legislation get introduced. And that does make abortion an important issue for the November elections, particularly for pro-life folks. You don't want to have the message get out that somehow Roe has been overturned, so you don't have to worry about who is representing you. Now you have to worry times 10. Who is representing you, because they can actually do something now, something really substantive on the issue of abortion and protecting your unborn residents.
Yeah, well,
so that's really where we're focused.
And that's why we have to pray for this, Republican sweep in November, and let's shake up some of these state houses, and hopefully we'll be in a lot better shape come January.
Well, and I don't want to make it Republican because, frankly, I served in the legislature at a time when there were still pro-life Democrats here in Illinois, very strong ones.
Yeah,
they were the ones that would come and go to press conferences with me, condemning pro-abortion legislation. And of course, we were the home of Dan Lipinski, who was a congressman who was a pro-life Democrat, co-chair of the pro-life caucus in the U.S. House. So I mean, my prayer is that the pro-life politicians win. Republican or Democrat, and I would love it. We've actually in Illinois, we had a Democrat, pro-life Democrat run for one of our inner city congressional seats.
Yeah, Chris Butler. We spoke to him. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Right. We have some good pro-life Democrats in Louisiana. So yeah. But Peter.
So go ahead, Jen.
Look. Again, I just want to thank Thomas More and everything you guys do. I didn't even know. I just happened to stumble upon that story. It's like, wow, there's Peter. Like, he's in the Washington Post. And then I heard from Tom about the backlash you were receiving. But you know what? This is getting the word out there. When something's in the Washington Post, it then becomes a big deal.
Fine. Well, and that's it's percolated up now to the they call it the legacy media, or the muckety mucks in Washington D.C. And so I think those folks are maybe they didn't expect us on the pro-life side to try to protect all of our unborn residents, not just the ones that happen to be physically present in our state, but all of our residents.
Well, you know what? So, yeah, Peter, that's probably why Biden is making this executive order today. Probably after reading that article, and I can imagine Biden said, "Who is this Peter Breen? Who is this guy?" Like, oh boy. But Peter, you're the man. Thank you so much, brother, for all this good work you're doing. This has been so helpful. Just the way that you boil things down, the way you define things. And that's right. That's the takeaway is this, is that, taking an unborn child across state lines is tantamount to taking a born child across state lines to do something evil. So, we go from there.
Here's the answer on this. I was even seeing some pro-life commentators not quite understanding that abortion now in the law, and again, it hasn't been this way for either our entire lives or our entire adult lives, depending on how old you are. You've never been able to treat the unborn child as a child. But it's core to the Dobbs holding.
Yes.
There are two human beings involved in an abortion. And that's how they were able to differentiate Dobbs from the gay marriage cases and all the other stuff and say, no, this just applies to abortion because it's unique, because there are two human beings. And so when you look at it that way, and you have to look at it that way if you're going to honestly evaluate the legal implications of any proposed policy, then you can't but come to the conclusion, of course, a state can protect its unborn residents the same way that it could protect a born resident. And so that's where we want to push that forward, move it through, and I think you're going to see great results there in the states as we come up in the next year, and then in the federal government, you could see a real change in 2024, where this issue is likely to come to the fore, especially if Biden does this executive order, depending on what it says and how it's allowed to be enforced by the courts. 2024, that presidential election, the congressional elections, could really involve abortion. That could be a big electoral issue. And it hasn't been at the federal level for a long time, just because of the work of the Supreme Court.
Well, Peter, let's get it done. Thank you. I'm sitting here listening to you talk, thinking, man, we got to get Peter back, running for office again. But the truth is, you're doing a lot of great work right now. So maybe you can hold off on becoming a U.S. senator and presidential candidate for a couple more years, Peter.
Well, I live in Illinois, and this is where I'm from. Right. So we've got a little bit of an issue here. We've got to do a little bit of work. And I have two little kids, so that has kept me busy on the home front. So my wife is glad to have me home a little more when I'm not traveling for Thomas More.
Okay, Peter. Well, I hope you have a great weekend at home with your family this weekend. Thank you again, sir, for taking the time to be with us. This has been so helpful.
Great. Glad to be with you guys.
Okay. Peter Breen from the Thomas More Society. God bless you, brother.